Assalamu alaikum. Peace be with you. Thanks for joining me again for this continuing discussion on the Quran in dialogue with other faiths and scriptures. And today I want to talk with you about Jesus and his renewal of the faith. So, what faith? Let's talk about that in detail. Now, prior to Jesus, on whom be peace, we know that there have been many prophets, and Jesus, on whom be peace, comes after the prophet Musa alayhi salam. And Musa alayhi salam is associated with the Torah, as we saw in our last episode. The Torah had been interpreted in a very legalistic way up to the time of Jesus, on whom be peace. So Jesus, peace be upon him, renews the faith in the Torah by bringing it back to the spirit of what the law was really all about. So why is Jesus, on whom be peace, doing all of this, and how does that play out in the great scriptures, including the Bible and the Quran? Let's take a look. First, I want to start with the Quran. I'll turn to the Quran's depiction of Jesus and his very important role in the abrogation of some things in the Torah and making things easy for people. So in Surah 3, verse number 45, the angels are giving an annunciation to Mary that she will have a child, and she wants to know, how can I have a child when no mortal has touched me? And the angel says, so it will be. When God decrees a thing, he only says to it be, and it becomes. And now we come to Jesus, on whom be peace, preaching to his people, and he is outlining his role, like what did he come to do? And among the things he has come to do is this, starting with verse number 50. وَمُصَدِّقًا لِمَا بَيْنَ يَدَيَّ مِنَ التَّوْرَاةِ وَلِيُحِلَّ لَكُمْ بَعْضَ الَّذِي حُرِّمَ عَلَيْكُمْ وَجِئْتُكُمْ بِآيَةٍ مِّن رَّبِّكُمْ فَاتَّقُوا اللَّهَ وَأَطِيعُونِ إِنَّ اللَّهَ رَبِّي وَرَبُّكُمْ فَاعْبُدُوهُ هَذَا صِرَاطٌ مُّسْتَقِيمٌ. That's including verse number 51. So let's read that in the English translation. And I will confirm the Torah revealed before me and legalize some of what had been forbidden to you. I have come to you with a sign from your Lord. So be mindful of God and obey me. Surely God is my Lord and your Lord. So worship him alone. This is the straight path. So a few points are worthy of note here. Jesus comes to confirm the Torah. So he's saying, okay, whatever God has revealed in the Torah, that's fine. But he's also legalizing some of what had been previously forbidden. That does not mean that Jesus is doing this of his own accord. He is receiving revelation from God, and God is directing him on what to legalize for the people. And it doesn't mean that it's without rhyme or reason. No. Some of what has been previously forbidden were there for a temporary time and for a reason. And once the time has elapsed or the reason is no longer in existence, then naturally the law no longer applies, and Jesus is just simply announcing that and clarifying that for them. Now, he has come to them with a sign from his Lord, which means that Jesus is performing miracles as a sign that God is with him. Jesus is not acting alone. And so he calls on them, فَاتَّقُوا اللَّهَ وَأَطِيعُونِ, have the awareness of God and obey me, which is the call of the prophets in general, according to the Quran, that we are to believe in God and we are to follow the prophet of the time. And at that time, it was the prophet Jesus. And finally, he says, surely God is my Lord and your Lord, so worship him alone. This is the straight path. Jesus, therefore, is announcing that he has a God, and it is that God that everyone should worship, just as Jesus himself is worshiping that God. And that is the straight path. So that's the Quran's depiction of Jesus as one who abrogated some of the Old Testament law. So Jesus is calling for a renewal. He's calling for the spirit of the law to be followed. So whereas something may have been deemed impermissible at the time, it was there for a reason. The reason no longer applies. So use your judgment and come to a better application of the law. Let's look at the Bible to see what it says. And naturally, we will look at the New Testament for this, because basically Old Testament, which is the Bible of the Jews, does not really apply here, since we are concerned with Jesus, and he is presented by name in the New Testament of the Christian Bible. Now, here Jesus, on whom be peace, ratified the Old Testament law. In Matthew chapter 23, starting with verse number 1, Jesus said to the crowds and to his disciples, the scribes and the Pharisees sit on Moses' seat. So he's telling them, look, the scribes and the Pharisees, these are the Jewish leaders, they sit on Moses' seat. Therefore, do whatever they teach you and follow it, but do not do as they do, for they do not practice what they preach, and so on. So the point here is that the followers of Jesus, on whom be peace, are being directed by Jesus to follow the law of Moses. And to get it even from the rabbis of the time, but not to do as the rabbis do, because they're not practicing what they preach. Now, you've heard the old saying, "Do as I say, not as I do." Well, here it is expected that you should actually do as you say. The two should be one and the same. But they were not treating them as one and the same. They were preaching one thing, practicing another. Jesus is saying to his disciples, okay, do what they're preaching. That is the law of Moses, but don't do as they do because they're corrupt. All right. So that means that Jesus, on whom be peace, ratified the law, and he was himself adhering to the Old Testament law in general, even though he abrogated some things, just as the Quran mentioned. Now, are there other indications in the Bible that Jesus, on whom be peace, also considered God to be his God? Yes, just as the Quran said that he said, "Inna Allah Rabbi wa Rabbukum fa'budu," say, God is my Lord and your Lord, so worship him. We find in John chapter 20 that Jesus, according to what is depicted, had been put on the cross. He was his body was put in the tomb. One of his female disciples, Mary of Magdala, came to visit the tomb and found that the tomb was empty. She did not find Jesus's body. She met what appeared to her to be the gardener in that garden, and she, mistaking him for the gardener, says, "Sir, if you have carried him away, tell me where you have laid him." This is John chapter 20, verse number 15. And so Jesus eventually addresses her in verse number 16 and says to her, "Mary." Now, maybe from the way he said her name, that sparked something in her, and she realized who he was, and she turned around and said to him in Hebrew, "Rabbuni," which means teacher. Jesus said to her, "Do not hold on to me, because I have not yet ascended to the Father, but go to my brothers and say to them, I am ascending to my Father and your Father, to my God and your God." So Jesus, according to that declaration, has a God. And that is the same God as the God that his followers, whom he refers to as his brothers, should adore and worship. So the Quran's message seems to be resonated in the Old and the New Testament, that there is only one God, and God sends messengers. Now, Jesus is one of those messengers, and Jesus himself is declaring that God is my God and your God, so worship him. And according to the Quran, that is the straight path. Jesus, on whom be peace, was not into strict legalism. He was showing people that you need to follow the spirit of the scriptures. In Matthew chapters 5 to 7, there's a long discourse in which Jesus is both ratifying the Old Testament, but at the same time drawing out the spirit. He is saying, for example, you have heard that it was said of old, do this, but I'm telling you this. And basically what he's telling them is, don't go by the strict legalism, look at the spirit behind it. So, for example, he says, all right, the Old Testament, he doesn't say Old Testament, but he says, you have heard it said that you should, love hate your enemies. But I say to you, love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you. So here we have, legalistically, yes, you're allowed to have this abhorrence for people who are your enemy, especially those who are trying to attack you and to wipe you off the face of the planet. But while that is legally valid, at the same time, there is a spirit behind the entire scriptures. And the scriptures are teaching you not to hate, but to love. And so you should love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you. So what does all of this mean for today? It means that 1, that what Jesus, on whom be peace, was preaching is similar to what is there in the Quran and in the life example of the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him. A balanced approach to law where we do not adhere to a strict legalism, but we see the spirit behind the law. Jesus, on whom be peace, is reported to have said that the Sabbath is made for man, not man for the Sabbath. What did he mean by this? That the Sabbath regulations are there for the benefit of people. So by saying you have to rest on the Sabbath day, that gives people at least a day of rest. Otherwise, people would work as we're doing today, work day in, day out, 24/7, and so on. And of course, we die of stress. But Jesus, on whom be peace, is saying, okay, you have the Sabbath as a day of rest that was given for the benefit of human beings. But then people took it to the extreme and said, no, you can't do any work on the Sabbath. And they start to specify what qualifies as work. And then what they put as work, this gets down to very minutiae in practical matters and makes it difficult for people. So Jesus says, no, you don't need all of those difficulties. The Sabbath was, after all, made for the benefit of human beings. It's not that human beings are made to keep the Sabbath. So get the order in right. It's in sequence here. So since the Sabbath was made for people, for their benefit, and not the other way around, don't try to force fit people and curtail all of the practical activities only to fit the Sabbath regulations. No, you can have a little bit of lessening of the strictures therein. We see also in the Quran that there is a balance. Yes, the Quran has laws, but not too many. And the Quran calls upon us to follow a middle way and to be ummah wasatan, a balanced ummah. And the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, is reported to have taught us to see the spirit behind things and not to practice a strict legalism, not to go to excess in the way in which we interpret the law. So we see a continuation of these great teachings through Jesus, on whom be peace, renewing the faith for the Jewish people at the time. And we see the Prophet Muhammad, on whom be peace, mirroring that sort of renewal, emphasizing the spirit while also having laws. And so we have a balance. It's not a strict legalism, nor is it a loose laissez-faire. So how does this all apply to us today? Reflecting on Jesus as one who renewed the faith of the Old Testament, at least bringing out the spirit behind it, let us think about the Quran as a message along similar lines. We can see that the Quran calls on us to follow laws, but gives us only a few laws. And the Quran calls on us to follow the spirit behind the laws, not to stick to a strict legalism. And it is mentioned that whenever the Prophet, peace be upon him, was faced with two permissible alternatives, he always picked the one that is easiest. We shouldn't think that picking the hardest thing is the one that is going to please God most, but God has given us so many permissions. We should take the permissions of God delightfully and give thanks to God for his permissiveness. So not a strict legalism and not a loose laissez-faire, but a balanced way in between. It is what the Quran terms as the balanced ummah that we ought to be. And let us end with an uplifting message by saying that today we have the opportunity, as Ramadan is coming to a midpoint, for us to think about sharing this message with people of other faiths as well. As we share our iftar and we share chai and samosas in the nights of Ramadan, let us also share the message of the Quran with other people. Let us talk to them about Jesus, on whom be peace, how he renewed the faith in the previous scriptures, how he brought out the spirituality, and how the Quran and the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, also bring out that same spirituality in a new and a different, more exciting way. So thank you for joining me. Tomorrow, God willing, we will talk about the golden rule. What is the golden rule? How is the best way to express it? What are the criticisms that it has received? And how can we apply the golden rule in our lives today and share it with other people for tomorrow? So join me again. Peace be with you. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Assalamu alaikum. This is Muslim Media Hub. There's so much that happens in this building.
This is where we produce the television show called Let the Quran Speak.
And there are podcasts, shows, and documentaries in progress.
As you can see, this building is very essential for the good work that we're doing. This is why we purchased it for $2 million.
We've already paid off about a third of this building.
And we have another $84,000 to pay this year.
We're looking for 84 kind souls to give $1,000 each. Can you be one of those people?
I hope you will, or give whatever you can. Every dollar counts.
Thank you, and may Allah bless you and your loved ones this Ramadan and always.
Peace be with you. Assalamu alaikum and Ramadan Mubarak.
Assalamu alaikum.